Hello, my friends. As you know, today your U.S. history teachers can't be with you because we're in some training. So instead, we're going to send you two recordings on 6.07 and 6.08 to help you keep up with your information from the OHS. So make sure you do go take a look at the work that's in there because there's some really good maps you want to look at. But this should help you with the basic information so you can be better prepared. So today we're talking about changing times, changes, and sometimes a little change can be a good thing, but sometimes we sure don't want that change too. We want to stick our head in the sand like this ostrich. I like that. Don't fear change. Change is good. You go first. So we're going to see some changes here around the world, especially concerning the countries that were once part of the USSR. And then in the second video, we'll be talking about changes abroad and in the United States. Today we're going to be talking about some changes in geography and some of the challenges of the post-Cold War world. You would think, well, the Cold War's over, all the problems are solved, right? Not. You can take a look here. You can see this red part. This is the Warsaw Pact under the Cold War. Blue is NATO, the non-communist countries. So remember that Iron Curtain is that line between the communist and non-communist countries that divides them. Is the Iron Curtain real? No, it was just a figure of speech. You're not actually going to go to Europe and find a gigantic curtain or gigantic curtain rods. Sorry to disappoint you. It's not real, but it is that referring to that divider. So this is the way we see Europe at the end of the Cold War. We have the Warsaw Pact, and notice just this large area, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or USSR. But, let me click. We're going to see some significant changes after the Cold War, and we see a lot of countries in here that are going to become independent and establish their own governments, including this little pink area, which I'm going to talk a lot about today, Yugoslavia. So take a look after the Cold War. You'll notice that there's areas like Ukraine, Belarus, Latvia, Lithuania. They didn't even exist over here. And look, here they are here. We have Czechoslovakia has broken into two pieces, Czech Republic and Slovakia. That reflects the fact they're different ethnic groups that were kind of shoved together. But I'm really interested in focusing first on this little pink area known as Yugoslavia. Look at the massive change in it. Here it's just one area, and look at all the little countries that pop up after it comes apart. So let's talk about Yugoslavia first. And see, here it is, nice and pink, with Albania kind of tucked up next to it. This is during the Cold War. And there was a lot of problems in Yugoslavia because of the various ethnic and religious groups that were in there. They were all sort of jammed together at the end of World War I, and I'll talk about why, but they really didn't like each other, and that can cause a problem when you're trying to create a country together. During the Cold War, notice it's just basically one pink area, but after the Cold War, that's where things get really interesting. Compare those two. How does it change after the Cold War? Well, you can see it breaks into different groups, and they all kind of come up with their own governments. Before the war, during the Cold War, Yugoslavia is kind of communist, kind of not. They've got their own hybrid version of it. After the war, you're going to find different governments and different ways of doing things. How many countries come out of former Yugoslavia? We've got Macedonia, Albania, Kosovo, Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, Slovenia. So check my math, but I'm pretty sure that's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different countries come out of this tiny area of Yugoslavia. I mean, look, it's just right here next to Italy. It's itty-bitty, and they were just crammed in together. So let's talk a little bit about Yugoslavia. Now, when I was a kid, we loved the name Yugoslavia. We used to have this joke where someone would say to you, Yugoslavia, and you go, no, Yugoslavia. Like I said, we didn't really get the point of the name, but we just like the "you-go" in it. Yugoslavia was formed at the end of World War I. And what happened was, at the end of this, they took all these pieces away from Austria-Hungary, you know, the big empire, and they were like, we don't know what to do with them. They're really too small to be on their own and create their own countries. They're going to get taken over by somebody, but we don't want to give them back to Austria-Hungary. So they just sort of went, okay, you're your own country. They just squished them together and created Yugoslavia, which would give them a chance to make their own decisions. Of course, the problem is they hated each other. They argued and fought about everything, and their economy was terrible for quite a while. But then at the end of World War II, a man named Tito comes along. Here's a picture of our friend Tito. And he is able to take control of Yugoslavia and unite it in sort of a communist-like situation because of the force of his personality. He was very charismatic and people were just enthralled by him and they just wanted to follow him. So what he does is he goes to Yugoslavia and he says, okay, I'm going to take the 6 biggest ethnic groups and we're going to create 6 equal republics: Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Serbia, Slovenia, Macedonia, and Montenegro. And we're going to put these together and we're going to work together as a group. But the thing is, Tito was really smart. He kept most of the power. So when a fight would break out, he'd just say, oh, that's it. I'm making the decision. And the thing about Yugoslavia is it actually was doing okay. It was starting to turn around. The groups were starting to work together. But then in 1980, he dies. And all these old enmities begin to resurface. And Slobodan Milosevic comes in. He takes control of Serbia, which is one of the largest groups in there. And he decides that this place would be perfect if they got rid of all the other ethnic groups. So he begins these ethnic cleansings. He begins attacking the different ethnic groups. And so there's wars that go on through the mid-90s that the U.S. finally actually gets involved in and says, guys, this is ridiculous. You're just killing each other because you're from different ethnic groups. And I thought this was pretty funny, by the way, this Slobodan Milosevic card, like he's some sort of Dungeons and Dragons character. But he was pretty evil. He was tried for his war crimes and found guilty of the majority. By 2000, the 6 republics become independent, a few more pop up, and the UN recognizes them and says, okay, you guys can't work together, do your own thing. So Croatia is one of those countries, and I always love the way Croatia looks on a map because it looks to me like a dragon or an alligator kind of eating Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is just because of the way it's drawn, not because it's actually trying to eat it, but it does sort of seem prophetic. And here's a beautiful picture of it. It's a gorgeous country right there on the Adriatic. It's located on the mountains. You can see a mountain here. There's not a whole lot of flat land in Croatia, and it's a major tourist area. And in those wars I mentioned from 91 to 95, the Croats and the Serbs were 2 of the largest groups. So the Serbs were the ones controlled by Milosevic, and they were trying to get rid of the Croats in these wars. And their war was very damaging to the city. It destroyed their industries, especially shipbuilding, which is their largest industry, and it stopped all tourism pretty much. The war, now that the war's over, of course, Croatia has improved dramatically. Tourism is a notable source of income. They're back to shipbuilding again. So Croatia is doing much, much better than it was. But let's talk about that little country it's eating, Bosnia and Herzegovina, which I always think is so interesting. It's a teeny tiny country with a humongous name. And you can see it's a beautiful country. Here's a beach and lots of trees. But it's a country that does have some troubles. When they created Bosnia-Herzegovina, they actually had to create a peace accord, the Dayton Peace Accords, where they partitioned off areas and they said, okay, this area over here is Muslim, this area over here is Serb, because they had, and they even have Croat people who are in there. They have so many different ethnic groups kind of jammed in together in this little bitty area. Their economy relies on exports because they really don't have room to grow much, so they export metals, energy, textiles, furniture. But they have a lot of unemployment and a lot of ethnic tension. Even now, they still have some disagreement and arguing. So they still get a lot of foreign aid to make their country work well. Now I'm going to move on from Yugoslavia and talk about some of the members of the USSR, or which was also called the Soviet Union, or United Soviet Socialist Republics, whichever is easiest to remember. And this is a picture of the USSR. The way it looked, all of these colors would have been one country back when it was, when Russia was controlling this entire area and it was all communist. And some of it is communist even today, but it's independent from Russia. It dissolved in 1991 and 15 new republics showed up. The first republics to become independent were called the Baltic republics. They're right there. And they are Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania in that order. And don't worry about these numbers. That just tells you where the republics are. It doesn't tell you what order they declared independence in. It was just a method of counting. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Ukraine and Romania. And here they are. They're next door neighbors. Here's Ukraine. Here's Romania. And you notice there's this little bitty country right in the middle. It's called Moldova. And I always feel like Moldova must be like, oh, okay, I've got Ukraine over here. I've got Romania over here. I'm squished. So I always laugh when I see that. But you can see Ukraine and Romania have kind of come up with an economic truce. Ukraine still has problems with Russia right here. They have border disputes with Russia, especially down in this area. Russia kind of goes all the way around it. And in 1986, Ukraine was the site of a horrible, horrible accident, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Their power plant just melted down and it spewed nuclear materials and radioactive waste into the air. They traveled 3 miles up into the atmosphere and then just spread out over Europe, Asia, even going as far as North America. Parts of Canada and Greenland got a little bit. It was, of course, more diluted. But there's a lot of cancers and health issues in this area, obviously, for the people who were alive at that time. And there are still parts of Ukraine that no one's going to be able to go into for hundreds of years until the contamination is dissolved somehow. Ukraine is doing better in the new millennium. They have economic growth, increased industrial output, and their inflation is going down. That's good. Romania, on the other hand, to the south here, their conditions under communist rule were pretty horrible because Romania fought communist rule a lot. So their exports were restricted, their electricity was rationed, and a lot of their stores were empty because they had no goods to sell. Even today, they have a huge issue with trusting the government. The people really don't trust the government. There's a lot of corruption in the public and the private sectors, and they have a lot of debt. So there's still a lot of issues going on in Romania that makes it tough for them. I'm also going to talk to you about Georgia, which is another country to come out of the USSR. And you might be thinking, no, miss, Georgia's a state. I know, I'm sitting in it. Well, Georgia is both the name of a state in the United States and a country in Asia, a beautiful country, as you can see down here from the picture. It's located here. This is Russia, this is Turkey, and then this area down here, this is, we call it Persia, just it's an old-fashioned name for Iraq and this whole area. But you can see it's located sort of between Europe and Asia. It's in Asia, but it's kind of very ideally situated in terms of geography. It's a huge object of rivalry for these areas because it has beautiful farmland, lots of minerals. People really want to control it, and it lies between the Caucasus Mountains and the Lesser Caucasus, which means that it's very easy to defend. It's good land, and of course it's right here on the Black Sea, so who doesn't want to own Georgia? And the United States is trying to help Georgia become energy independent from Russia because the more they're dependent on Russia, the less they are able to have their own independence. And yes, you can kind of see some of that Cold War rearing its head. There were two areas, South Ossetia and Abkhazia, that were actually autonomous areas, and they decided they were more Russian than Georgian, so they chose to go back to Russia in 92 and 93. And that is as far as I'm going to go today. I will be back in a few minutes, or depending, maybe you've already seen me if you've already watched this one, and we'll talk about the changes in the United States, Section 6.08. So if you have any questions, please let your teacher know. Good luck. I'll talk to you in a minute.